exposed to things you didn't know about before. 'Cause we're amateur reality hackers.
All right, welcome everybody. This is Amateur Reality Hackers. With me is Aaron Pelley. Pelley is just a legal juggernaut, in my opinion. He has been around in the cannabis industry for a very long time and helped many people that I personally know with extremely hard legal battles from the medical marijuana scene. And then he progressed his law firm into other things at this point. So that we kind of started talking before everything got going, and he pointed out that we should probably just hit record and keep things going where they were. So
Yeah.
one of the things he was saying his firm was getting into is cryptocurrency. In the past, I developed a privacy coin. It since failed because I wasn't trying to scam anyone, which if you aren't friends with somebody that has an exchange or you're scamming people, you're basically totally screwed in that industry. But yeah. Anyway, so
You
what
think
I
that was that's I mean, like so I'm pretty up to speed on a lot of this stuff, and some of the stuff you were talking about, I am like, because I've seen that like Solana is really kind of feels like they're trying to come in and take that role that Ethereum you had as well, which you were talking about earlier, is like to provide for other coins a platform to exist. But then, I just everything that I see and read online feels like that if it's not a rug pull, it's kind of like this small group of top 10, and then everything else is just opportunities to get something to go to 1,000% and then go back to 0.00001. And it
so
doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of in-betweens.
There are a few in-betweens, but they're rare. And just from my personal experience, when I first started my thing, what I knew how to code was PHP. And so I wasn't, God, man, this background is just being shifty. I'm sorry, folks. But the whole point of it was a website where anyone that wanted to spend their cryptocurrency at a business could go and basically look at this map of the USA that had every business that would accept any form of cryptocurrency and then drive their business those directions if they wanted. After I had started to develop this, I realized, oh my God, there's a bunch of companies that have themselves listed online as accepting cryptocurrency, and they just don't at all. And so using a website called Fiverr, I started having this super nice Jamaican lady go through and call these companies, which she would do for a nickel a phone call. And so she was going through and calling the companies that I had found and saying, hey, we found records saying that you take cryptocurrency. Don't worry, I don't need anything from you. I don't want anything from you. Just wanted to know if that was true. And then I get a confirmation or a no from them. And based on that, I started to build this really comprehensive map of businesses that actually were taking cryptocurrency currently, which surprisingly was pretty vast. Like I was able to find travel agencies that would take it for trips. I was able to find hotels that would take it. I was finding restaurants that would take it, car dealerships. This is 2019, 2020, around that time period.
Was
And
it specifically Bitcoin, or was it?
It ranged at the time.
Okay.
A lot of people were taking Litecoin. A lot of them were
Yeah.
taking the Lightning Network Bitcoin, that second layer Bitcoin thing that was going on. I don't even know what happened with that. I always thought it was kind of a bad idea from the technical standpoint, but hopefully they've developed past that and it's a robust, like working network now. But the whole idea was just like micro transactions in and out of Bitcoin from a secondary layer. And just, I didn't understand how that wasn't eventually going to lead to extreme bloat and like clogging of networks if they didn't properly do it all. So Litecoin is a big one. Monero is another big one. And it was interesting because based on my technical understanding of all the cryptocurrencies, none of the businesses were making sense in how they were using them. You know what I mean? And so you would have a coffee shop accepting Bitcoin, and it's like, well, that's got a 15-minute bare minimum transaction time off in a couple hours. How the hell do you know that the person didn't just scam you and that the transaction's not going to decline because there was, a double spend or something?
It's just not
That's
moving fast enough.
Yeah, it's not moving fast enough for that industry. But if they were to take something that had been scaled, like yeah, I'm a little disconnected from the current market, so I don't know what would be the best fit for it. But you know, uh, it's just something that has a much smaller transaction time, but it still is as robust, kind of a community and as safe as Bitcoin, then you'd be on a good track with that one. Um, I've always been a fan of Monero just because,
I mean, it is a great one because it truly lives to the spirit of that privacy thing. The funny
yes,
part about Monero is that from an investment standpoint, it sucks, but only because you're using it the way that it was meant to be used, which is people are spending it, right? So
Yes.
if you're spending something all the time, so people are always constantly trading it, it doesn't really go up in value. If people hold something, then of course it goes up in value because there's scarcity. And Monero, people are motivated to spend it because it's usable, it's private. But then the flip side of that is getting acceptance from, uh, countries like the United States, which are, kind of, at least for the last 20 years, have been knives out going after this. Although I don't know if you saw, and again, I only saw the headlines. I don't want to overquote it, but it sounded like Kamala Harris said something kind of like, we need a reset on our, position with
Hmm.
cryptocurrencies. And I thought that was an interesting statement because, again, in the cryptocurrency world, I think everybody was like, well, the only person that's going to be on board for this is the Republican Party. And now it sounds like the Democratic Party doesn't want anybody to be able to use that as a wedge. So Kamala came out as saying we need a reset, which isn't really saying anything at all, right? It's
Yeah.
reset to what, right? Like, but still, I thought that was interesting.
Well, and with the Trump family, being living down south now, I've fallen onto the more conservative side of things personally. But even with the Trump family, you have your own interesting scenario when it comes to cryptocurrency because their family is releasing a Trump coin. And so it's like, well, yeah, they're definitely going to do a bunch of stuff that's in support of cryptocurrency. They're not going to ruin the market in any way. But who says they're not going to immediately start creating laws that strangle out any coin that's not theirs? Because I know if I was, I would. Like that would be
Sure.
the first thing I did.
Yeah, always good when you're king, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and that's power corrupts, and it's good to know how it'll corrupt you if you ever get it. But it's interesting to see the progression of all that. One thing that I was going to say about Monero that I find very fascinating is that the other coins are all kind of linked to a ghetto stock market, is what I would call it. Somewhere where
Right.
there's a bunch of exchanges that never close, day
Yeah, they're
trading
open
is fine.
24/7,
Yeah, yeah.
Coinbase,
Yeah, nobody's crawling up your butt with a bunch of regulations. It's kind of the
just a
Wild
bunch of
West.
degenerates.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a great place. Monero, however, is not based around those markets, which is why you see that stability. And its true market hold is the dark markets. And my bet is probably a lot of it's in evidence locked up. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
so if you have a big section of that coin that's locked away in evidence and not getting moved around, and then the rest of it is in this black market, I was
Right.
I'll choose my language special here, carefully. Then it creates, like you were saying, kind of something it always runs within this like $40 to $120 band, or at least it did for a very,
Hmm.
very long time. And it doesn't ever seem to have that great 100 times breakout or the 1,000%, whee that everyone else has. And it also doesn't seem to be quite linked to any of the other markets. And it's just this weird outlier. But I think it's because its
Yeah,
stability is based on something completely different than the rest of
I
them
agree.
are.
Yeah.
And as scary as I'm sure that is for lawmakers, at the same time, if they were able to justify cash for the society in any way, then they should be able to easily justify this. And then
Right.
also at the same time appreciate its utility. Even though it might be the dark web or whatever in the dark markets that have kind of facilitated its growth and its necessity within the broader community. NASCAR came from people outrunning cops in the
Right.
booze days. It's
Yeah.
sometimes
Home
great
runners. Yeah.
things. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes great
Well, that's
things
kind of
come
funny
from
because
that.
that's the subject of both of our experiences, right? You and I have both come from these I refer to them as emerging markets, right? I
Hmm.
suppose I would like to call them illicit markets that became emerging markets, but at the end of the day, there were a lot of markets that were just not acceptable, and now they're moving into this more accepted, and even with going back to the coins,
Hmm.
you look. I mean, we're past the point where you can say that I mean, people aren't using this Bitcoin. I mean, they are using it in the black market, sure, but there's just a vast majority of people that are using it as an investment vehicle, and that's what it is. People are investing in it and holding it, right? So it's different than, I think, Moreno, because it has that, what you said about it. It's like it is much more in the illicit market, and it
Hmm.
probably, and it really doesn't care.
Mhm.
It's fine that it's not being traded on those other markets. It doesn't intend to because it stands kind of by its privacy motto. It's not letting anybody in through the back door. So
Yeah. So
this
would you
makes
like
sense to that
a
integrity.
a fun little dive into cryptocurrency lore here?
Yeah.
So Satoshi Nakamoto, everybody knows who that is,
Yep.
the infamous creator of Bitcoin. Um, a lot of people talk a lot of nonsense. The most realistic thing I've heard about him from sources that would make sense is that he was just a dev. He was a dev that another group had come to and said, hey, we need this coin. We need it to fit these things. It needs to be based around this concept that basically this hacktivist hippie movement had created called eCash back in the day. And we need you to take this and repackage it into something that we can use. And then he reached out to a small group of people and started this whole project, right? And so he was actually pretty hands off with the coding, but he had the broader image and the development idea behind it.
Hmm.
My speculation that fits a lot of the lore, especially with Hal Finney and him getting basically, as he was on his deathbed, he was the first recipient of Bitcoin ever. And he received it from Satoshi's computer. Right before he died, the CIA approached him and they had a nice little extended meeting with him and then left him alone. Nothing happened. No further anything that tied to that, right? And so my theory is that one of the agencies had gone to a developer and said, hey, we need something that gives the perception of complete privacy that actually will work as the perfect honeypot for any major crime. So that way we can track down, child sex trafficking, mafia,
Sure.
these other things. Because from a technical point, Bitcoin on the face, it looks so anonymous and so secret because it's got this encrypted feature to it. God, my mic is just tripping out here. That's so weird.
I like it.
But
It's a nice.
but it's it looks so encrypted on this surface. But the reality of it from behind the scenes is that you have something that is taking every single transaction from its very origin of creation and tracking it in a permanent distributed ledger that people 1,000% know how to trace back through every single person and connect to the computer that sent it, which means you now have a permanent ledger of every single transaction that ever happened tied to it. And especially with the in and out that happens between exchanges and the KYC info that was forced down their throats a few years back, it's now this perfect trap for anyone that has $2 million that they want to send overseas and hide from the IRS or, want to put into some sort of mafia crime. Well, yeah, who gives a shit if it takes the Fed 6 years to do their investigation, or if people try to destroy a computer that was sourced from or anything like that, because it's just permanently there and
It's
distributed
on the
across.
ledger
Yeah,
all
and
the
it's there across thousands of computers, so it can never be gotten rid of. Now,
time.
dropping back to the lore, let's say that this happened and that the CIA had gone to someone in particular and said, hey, you've developed a bunch of software in the past. We know you're connected to these groups. Here's $50 million. We need you to develop this thing for us. Here's what it needs to do. He develops it. Well, the guy that was Satoshi disappeared right after the Bitcoin was done being developed. The last emails went out and then just boop, into the night, right? Right after Satoshi disappeared into the night, about 2 months later, this crazy guy called Nicholas von Saberhagen showed up on the internet, and he wanted to use the same principles as Bitcoin to start building something a little different, and it was going to tackle all the problems that Bitcoin had overlooked. There is no proof that these are the same person, but to me, that 1,000% sounds like someone taking government money, going, "Here's the thing you wanted. Okay, now I'm going to go build the
Now I'm
thing
gonna go
people need." Yeah,
develop
yeah,
my
yeah.
own.
Yes, exactly. And so, especially if Satoshi is the person that I think it was, it completely fits his personality and is how he would handle things. I'm going to take the money, I'm going to build the thing you need to catch the bad guy. Now I'm going to turn around so all the poor sons of bitches you've been hassling over, cannabis and that kind of thing, have a means to pay remotely that isn't going to send them directly to jail without getting a, 200 for pass and go kind of thing. And so that's my little lore dump in theory is that Bitcoin and Monero actually both, in my view of things, or my opinion or guess, came from the same mind. And he
Hmm.
basically turned around and made a honeypot for the government on one hand, and then turned around and made something to,
Built his own.
yeah, basically a libertarian's wet dream with the other hand. So
That's awesome. And you said you were connected to McAfee?
yeah.
Background on
John,
that. That's kind of cool. I mean, I watched an amazing documentary, but that guy's had a crazy life. So
yeah, no, I actually have an interview with his ex-wife on here, and I still talk to one of his better friends, Rob, that did his like presidential campaign stuff and helped coordinate that when he was going to run for the Libertarian Party. Both of them are just amazing people, and one of his security guards still friends with him too. They're just all really cool people, and it bugs me the amount of shit he gets because he's definitely human, and because everything he did was very loud. His flaws were as loud as his, positive points. But no, my connection to him was weird and fun and really cool. I reached.
Exposing the most insane heist in Cyber City. Pirates and aliens working together. In the neon-lit maze of Cyber City, a team like no other assembles. Hardened space pirates with their eyes on the prize unite with cunning alien hackers. Their target? The most secure data vault in the galaxy. As the city sleeps, they strike. The pirates, masters of stealth, infiltrate the outer defenses, while the aliens, fingers flying over alien tech, breach the digital fortresses. Alarms blare, but they're undeterred. Each second counts as they navigate traps and firewalls. Suddenly the vault opens. Data streams like digital gold, but time's running out. Security forces close in, but our unlikely team fights back with blaster fire and code.
Defend yourself from the attack with Web Software Solutions.
Conversation, and then it turned out we just had a lot in common and kept talking. And I don't know, I have a lot of weird ideas and some technical knowledge, and so I kept, as I was learning encryption and PGP and that kind of stuff, I know that at one point a parent company he owned actually owned pretty good privacy and is very deep into encryption. And so I was asking him about that, and just I didn't realize it at the time, but in hindsight, the band taught me 80% of what I now know about cybersecurity and software, which is a majority of what I do for a living. So,
right, that's awesome. That's very cool.
yeah. And I mean, it just he, I think, could tell that I was in kind of an abusive relationship, and that I was like a dude trying to struggle through a very dark time. And so as often as possible, it seemed like he tried to make me feel special and elevate me and that kind of stuff and encourage me along. And so,
I love that. That's very cool. That's
yeah.
a cool story, man. That's a really cool story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And but behind the scenes, I have very few people that I could talk about as glowingly as him, if you want to know the truth.
No, that's great though. I love that.
Uh,
So when we met, when we met back in the medical days, like way back, and then as things progressed through the to the recreational days, where things switched, you kind of switched over to Kratom, and I was convinced that was the next thing. I mean, I
Yeah.
was convinced that was going to be the next thing on the ballot, the next thing that was going to happen, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because it didn't get scheduled, and that like leaves it in where it wants to be. But it was like the thing that ended up coming up next was psychedelics.
Yeah.
I mean, now we have, so they passed it in Oregon. It's been on the legislative agenda in Washington, California, Arizona. It hasn't gotten through, but it's like all these states are pushing for it. And there's a ton of medical information that's coming out about the benefits of it and stuff like that. But I mean, if I had to make a list right after recreational passed, and you're like, where do you think mushrooms will land? It wouldn't have even made it in the top 5, just because my experience with mushrooms, I mean, I'm kind of overplaying it. I actually was aware of microdosing and some of that stuff. I just think that the public view of mushrooms is like kind of the, the teenage perception of what mushrooms is, which is just getting blasted out in the, woods and seeing God for 3 hours, right?
Mhm.
But not really the kind of the treatment side or the some of the psychological impacts and even physiological impacts that it has on people. So I will tell you, I was literally stunned not to see kratom get in before mushrooms or a bunch of other things, really. I'm always happy to see any drugs get out of
Yeah.
off of where people are going to jail for them and into where they belong. You know what I mean? Because no matter what, the consumption is going to occur. A lot of people used to ask me, they used to say, well, do you just want all legal drugs? You just want like methamphetamines up at 7-Eleven and heroin? And my answer is absolutely. I think I'm convinced that would be one of the best things. Like not just for society as a whole, but just as a medical treating these people that have issues with it legally. Once you bust somebody, I mean, even on the criminal justice side, like I'll talk to prosecutors and they're like, all I'm doing is just, adjusting the price of what's happening with drugs. Every time I make a bust, I'm basically increasing probably crime. Because if the price goes up because you lost a dealer and there's less supply, what happens? They raise the price, and then now people have to commit more crimes to get the drugs that they want. I mean, it's just the cyclical part of it all is really kind of terrible and dumb. So
I have to agree. And I mean, from my perspective, I'm coming from a guy that was cannabis activist and had a lot of stuff to do in the cannabis industry for a long time, has a Kratom, well, the company's kind of died, but has Kratom connections still, and had a Kratom company, and it also has seen his ex-wife completely fall apart and get driven into meth. Like she's to the point where that's why I have full custody of our kids and custody of her older daughter now, is just because that meth was more important, you know what I mean? Or it had a bigger hook on her than that family life. And coming from that perspective and that duality, I still 100% agree with you. Like I would much rather see these things regulated and available over being in the hands of cartels and in the hands of criminals and in the hands of it doesn't go away. That's the problem that people seem to.
only the danger of consumption.
Yeah, well, and
right? Like, although Canada sees the light because they're like, because not for the right reasons, but just because all of a sudden, recreational drug users, which arguably white people, were getting killed, using cocaine over the weekend.
Yeah, with the fentanyl
okay,
and
now
all
we've
that
got
kind
a
of stuff.
problem.
Yep.
Now we've got a problem.
Yeah, and isn't that as soon as some white people die and they've got enough money, people start to notice. That's society's little
But
fucked
at least that did. I mean, I guess at least they recognized it eventually. But yeah, that the drug supply issue itself, or safe supply, is something that I'm now seeing a lot of talk of. Especially because I live close to the Canadian border, I'll hear a lot of talk about it because I pick up their radio channels, and it's a controversial subject, right? Like providing a safe supply of drugs to people is a weird industry for the government to be in, which I don't think they should necessarily be in providing the safe supply, but having the oversight of saying that is safe is better than the fentanyl deaths that are occurring at the rate that they're occurring. So
as weird as it sounds, I wouldn't even necessarily like I'm very anti-government generally, but considering that they kind of, in a lot of conspiracy theories, already sell drugs behind the scenes anyway, why the hell not give them this one? Let them feel like they got to win and they're super important.
Give them the W that
and then have it so that they take any profits or any money and just put it directly into the mental health crisis. Because if you could make drugs accessible, cheap, clean, and then take all the profit and just put it directly into, hey, but guess what? Life's good enough that you don't have to get high. Like you could just be sober, and this is an awesome place to be. I think
that's a lot of what it is, right? A lot of that drug abuse is mental health issues that are occurring anyway. So the fact that you're putting resources towards that would be the flip side of that. So I have to ask you this because what is going on with the kratom market? Is it similar to kind of what's happened with the cannabis market, where it's because a lot of people in the cannabis market, I don't think foresaw the commodity side of it, which is that the prices could really go down when people started growing on scale. Although I think there's other issues going on where people are growing on scale in the black market and disrupting the retail market itself. But ignoring all that, like what's happened is like people just didn't see a world where weed would be selling for 20 to 90 cents a gram, and that 90 cents was the high end. You know what I mean? And so they were praying it wouldn't go to $2 a gram, not realizing. And it's hard to keep your lights on when you're growing weed indoors and doing kind of the artisan stuff that people do, and you're trying to sell it for under $2 a gram. It's not, and take into the fact that, you're getting 280E tax, so you're not getting half or even a quarter of your write-offs. But ignoring all that, what happened, do you think, with the Kratom market? Is it a similar victim that it just kind of scaled out, or?
I it's a little more complex of an industry, as insane as that sounds, with the near rocket science complexity that goes behind the cannabis industry and everything that's happened in it in my lifetime. But I think it's because I want to be careful about how I word this. It is its own thing, and no one should consume it. Yay. But in theory, if someone was to consume it, it's going up against a different market. You know what I mean? So like the psychedelics and cannabis, they're their own standalone things. Cannabis kind of it was fighting against the beer industry or the liquor industry a little bit, and I remember them even lobbying against it pretty substantially at certain points. But I think in the big run, you got big pharma kind of standing in the way here. And I know that one of the companies that existed that has since shut down that I did their IT stuff back in the day. I was loosely connected to them. Um, they, God, how many was it? They had like 3 or 4 incidences where there was fake feds that showed up at their place trying to shut them down. And yeah, and it was one of those things where when they described the situation, I was like, that's not a competitive business. Like that's a big industry thing. Where it was like people in black suits showing up with earpieces and a black
Murdered out
SUV.
SUVs.
Yeah, exactly. Where I'm
Well,
like, God, that's somebody that had some serious money to put behind faking out somebody and trying to get him to shut down. And
right.
that was at the time one of the bigger kratom companies in the industry that was happening to. And so in my theory that there's just it's a different beast that industry is going up against, and the fact that it's in this weird state where it's not illegal on a federal scale, the states are kind of piecemeal deciding what the hell to do with it. That's better than I would have expected with the monster they're going up against.
Hmm.
That said, it seems like it's kind of going the same route as cannabis in the sense that it's very state by state right now, and some of the
Mhm.
states are being pretty sketchy about how they do things.
Hmm.
And so, for example, one place I know of, and I'm going to leave out any details so I just don't get them in trouble. Their local like area keeps trying to shut them down, and it's for things that don't make any sense. And so it's like, for example, all they serve is smoothies, drinks, right? And they got shut down for not having a grease trap.
Right. Yeah, and
It's
that is a typical kind of where local municipality takes issue with it, and people figure, the feds are the worst, and then it's the state, but people wildly underestimate the power of the local. They're called different things in different jurisdictions, but business planning department, or where you get the people that could basically come in and inspect your businesses and make sure that they're running in compliance,
Mhm.
and to code. Those people can destroy you, and
Oh, and
they just have pages and pages of different things that they can draw from. And then if they don't have something, they can just ask something be written up, and
and I
then
mean,
get it passed at the next city meeting or county meeting or whatever it is. And then the next, and so there, and once you're up against them and they have it in for you, I mean, I don't necessarily tell people to move, but it's like life is going to be infinitely harder once you've made an enemy of the local jurisdiction. It's kind of crazy.
well, and I mean that's I don't know if have you ever heard the story of the killdozer?
Why does that sound? Oh, yeah, yes, I have.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's 100% just a guy snapping because his local
Right.
municipality screwed him over as hard as they could. Like,
And they have the power to do that, and he doesn't really have any recourse, like
no,
except just to make
killdozer.
it pay.
That's yeah. That's,
Just remember, there's always one, and that's probably the biggest problem with when you do things like that, and you don't give people that that ability to feel like they've got that. I mean, that's what our jurisprudence is built on, right? Like, don't go out there and beat the crap out of that guy in your front lawn. We have a legal system that we use
Yeah.
to be able to make sure that there's fairness and justice in the world. But when you're up against the local municipalities, it doesn't even feel like fairness. The fair is, at Puyallup. It's not here. It's going to be, it's just impossibly unattainable.
Yeah. So we got about 7 minutes left before
Oh, yeah,
Zoom
yeah,
gets mad at me,
Go ahead.
but I had something I was going to ask you about. I know that currently the marijuana laws, they're either successfully shifting them on a federal level or we're talking about it. Do you know if they succeeded in changing things on a federal level, the scheduling for cannabis, or whether that was just
Yeah,
some
so the
high?
scheduling is in play.
Okay.
They were really so moving from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. And so the big topic or conversation with everybody is, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And in some ways it means nothing. There's only one real takeaway for the cannabis industry moving Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, but it's huge, which is you no longer are presumptively 280E. So the 280E no longer applies to us anymore. And 280E, the way the taxes worked is that you just couldn't get write-offs. There are some exceptions to 280E, but generally speaking, you were taxed in full on your payroll, on advertising, on things that where every other business could say, hey, that's a write-off, and here's how much I get out of that money, where I don't have to pay the full amount to the feds. And so that was a really big deal. And I think that change, hopefully we'll get it. And I don't really know how it plays out because we're so close to an election, whether this gets done or not. But the mutterings that I'm hearing is this is happening before the changing of the guard, that we are, no matter what, we're going to get this to Schedule 3. And part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that, we have both presidents, by the way, both the president and the vice president are behind this. So the newly, we'll see if she gets elected or Trump gets elected, but I don't know how it plays out if Trump comes in and it doesn't get done.
Mm-hmm.
But everything I hear says that it is going to get done. But all the other things that people are talking about, it doesn't make us compliant because it moves it into Schedule 3 is like, you still need FDA approval. It's still required that, so all of us are kind of engaging in activity that's not legal at the federal level and in compliance with Schedule 3. But it takes away that 280E, and that's such a big deal for everybody. I mean, I talk to businesses. I talked to one, I was on a panel with a retailer who said that they were being taxed at 83 to 89%.
Oh, man. And that's in
That's
Washington?
not realistic, man. That's not, if you're only getting 11 cents for every dollar you collect, you're not staying open.
Yeah.
I mean, that goes beyond like, this is a labor of love. That means that you're either breaking the law and you're still open, or you're not following the rules and you're still, you know what I mean? There's just no way that works.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even when you get taxed at the regular rate, it's, as a business owner myself, I get taxed at a regular rate, and it's really hard. Those taxes cut deep, and so to get taxed at, 2-3 times that is like, I just don't know how. And so, like I said, big deal for the industry. I think it really changes everything. I don't know that we're going to, after we get to Schedule 3, what the next thing is. I think that it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think businesses will be able to show more success. And right now, the West Coast is really, just taking it in the pants for like the last 18 months. So it's been a tough year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope it definitely grows the market some. I had one other weird thing I was going to ask you about. On Facebook and other places like that, you see ads for the companies that are selling THC products, and they'll mail them straight to your door. And it's obviously some sort of hemp derivative at best, if not something sketchier. Those companies, and this is just, you can correct me if I'm wrong, those companies are at that point liable for selling pot interstate because they're claiming it to be pot, right?
Oh, yeah. And some of them are straight up selling weed. Some of them are selling THCA. So they're doing like the derivatives where they're reducing it down. There's a couple of attorneys that have come out and basically blessed this idea that if you're, because anytime you reduce something down, you take all the CBD out of something, you're also taking, even if it's only 0.3%, you're taking the THC out of it as well. And so you're isolating all these different things, and you have some of it sitting over here in this pile, and they're turning around and selling it and saying that it's pursuant to the, Farm Bill of 2018, and it's totally okay because it's a derivative, da 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 da. And by the way, I like attorneys that make those arguments. I like those arguments. I think it's bleeding edge. But like what you're talking about is some of the things that are going on Instagram and Facebook are straight up drug dealers selling drugs, and part of that has to do with the fact that nobody's home. Like nobody's really going after and prosecuting any of this, and the feds have quit looking at it almost entirely, unless there's some other crime being occurred. They're not looking at it. The states are kind of trying to deal with it, but it's like, it's sticking the fingers in the holes of the dam. It's like, it's just this continuous flow. And the industry itself is also in their own moral crisis because it was built on the idea that nobody should go to prison for a plant. And now all these people are out there competing with them, and they're like, hey, can we send those guys to prison? So they're in their own, crisis of how to deal with this problem. And so I don't know that there's an easy fix or a quick fix. But we're going to have to come to terms with what we want to do with this plant and how we want to treat it. But yeah, and then people say, well, why can't I do that if they're doing it? And of course, the response is, well, it's similar to, asking me can I go 70 miles an hour? Because I saw a guy going 90 miles an hour. It's like, no, you can't do either. The speed limit's 55. You're asking a lawyer what the speed limit is. It's not an option, it's a limit. 56 is a crime. Everybody else is doing 59. So there you go.
I think you kind of already answered it, but how about like a user? So if somebody was just scrolling through, they saw that ad, they clicked on it, buy something, any chance of them becoming liable at that point, unless I'm sure, if they were already being investigated, but
yeah, they're still committing a crime. I mean, and again, now you're talking about somebody going 56 miles an hour. Do I think they're going to get arrested or prosecuted? No, but I can't advise anybody commit crimes. It's like, it's just not a good idea. Find a legal resource, especially if you're in a state where you can get it. I guess that's my biggest thing about that. It's like, and I was hoping that change would come sooner than later. I mean, you don't find very many people that want to buy booze in a mason jar. Yeah. Because they don't want to go blind. And it's like, I don't know why you want to buy weed from a gas station or from somebody online if you can get something that's been tested for pesticides and heavy metals. I mean, especially some of the stuff in Oregon's fantastic, where it's like it's been tested for everything under the sun. So I imagine that change will occur over time, but it's not something that's happened as quick as I thought.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, we're pretty much out of time, man. It was great talking to you. We'll have to do this again soon, man. That was
Same,
a lot
really
of fun.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, most
All right,
definitely, man. Have a great day.
Take care, Jeremy.
Yep.